The morning I was supposed to get married, I told my fiancé it was over. I was 30 years old. The decision was not a product of panic. It was the result of a sudden, terrifying, and profound clarity. He was standing by the window of the hotel suite, all ready in his trousers and button-down shirt. My mother was adjusting the sleeves on my dress, which was hanging on the back of the door. "Mark," I said. He turned. "I can't do this." My mother stopped her adjustments. Mark's expression didn't change for a full 3 seconds. He processed the statement as if it were a data point in a projection that had gone awry. "Can't do what, Chloe?" "The photographer is going to be here in 20 minutes. I can't marry you. I'm not going to marry you." I said it to him, but also to my mother, and to the dress, and to the whole life it represented. "The wedding is off." My mother made a sound, a small intake of air. Mark walked over from the window. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. "This is an anxiety attack. It's normal. Let's sit down." "It's not anxiety," I said. "I've never been more certain about anything. The life we've built, the life we were about to formalize, it isn't mine. It's a plan I made when I was a child, and I've been executing it perfectly. But I am not that child anymore." My mother started to speak, her words tangled with disbelief. I looked at her. "I am calling the venue now. I need you both to leave the room." That choice was delivered in less than 5 minutes, but it was forged over 14 years. It began, as so many miscalculations do, with a teenager who believed she could conquer uncertainty by writing a list. In October of 2011, when I was 16, I sat at my desk with a sheet of graph paper and a black pen. I drew a timeline. I labeled it the plan. By age 22, I would graduate with a degree in economics from a Tier 1 university. By 23, I would secure an analyst position at a major financial institution. I would be in a committed, stable relationship by 25, engaged by 28, and married at 30. The purchase of a 2-bedroom property in a desirable urban neighborhood was slated for age 32. I did not see this as a list of hopes. I saw it as a sequence of non-negotiable objectives. Adulthood, to me, was a project to be managed, and this was the project plan. The variables were to be controlled, the risks mitigated. There was no column for deviation. There was no line item for doubt. I met Mark in my second year of university. He was a year ahead of me, also studying economics. He was president of the investment club, his grade point average was a 3.9, and his father was a partner at a law firm. On paper, he was not just a suitable partner, he was the correct one. He fit the specifications of the plan as if he were a custom component. Our first date was a conversation about internship strategies. Our second was a study session for a shared statistics course. It was efficient. Mark was supportive in a way that felt like guidance. When I considered adding a minor in art history, he was pragmatic. "It's a great interest, Chloe," he said one evening, while we were reviewing our course selections online. "But is it the best use of your credit hours? Think about the signaling effect to recruiters. A focus on econometrics is much stronger." I dropped the art history registration. His logic was flawless. My path was about strength, not interest. Another time, my friends were planning a spring break trip to Mexico, a week with no agenda beyond sitting on a beach. I was excited. Mark saw it differently. He had found a 3-day Future Leaders in Finance conference in New York, scheduled for the same week. "Think about the ROI, Chloe," he argued, showing me the itinerary on his laptop. "The networking opportunities alone are worth it. You make connections there that will pay dividends for a decade. Mexico is a sunk cost." When I told him I just wanted a break, he looked at me with genuine confusion. "A break from what?" "We're building our foundation. This is the critical phase." I went to New York. I collected business cards and missed my friends. I told myself it was the mature choice. My choices were narrowing, but my trajectory was sharpening. I was on schedule. My degree was a series of tactical victories. I did not love economic theory, but I was exceptionally good at mastering its models. I could spend a weekend memorizing formulas for the Black-Scholes model, not because I was fascinated by options pricing, but because I knew it would constitute 40% of the final exam. My life became a calendar of inputs and outputs. 12 hours in the library produced an A-, 16 hours produced an A. I scheduled my days in 30-minute increments, a color-coded system of classes, study blocks, gym time, and designated relationship time with Mark. It was optimized for performance. The misalignment was a low hum I could easily ignore. It became harder to ignore in the winter of my senior year. My father, who was 56, had a heart attack. It was not fatal, but it was severe. He was an accountant, a man who had followed his own version of a plan with unwavering discipline. Now he was in a hospital bed, his schedule dictated by nurses and cardiac monitors. I drove home every weekend that semester. My meticulously planned calendar now had to accommodate the 3-hour drive, the rigid hospital visiting hours, and long conversations with cardiologists about plaque and stress. One Friday, I was sitting in my father's room, my laptop open as I tried to finalize a thesis on sovereign debt restructuring. He was watching me. "You're going to burn yourself out, kiddo," he said. "I'm fine, Dad. Just have a big deadline." "Your deadline is an arbitrary date on a syllabus." My deadline was almost a real one. It changes your perspective. I got the A on the thesis. I graduated summa cum laude. But I remember the drive back to the university after that conversation, a single thought repeating itself. His plan had failed him. Or perhaps he had failed the plan by having a human body that refused to comply. I pushed the thought away. My plan was better. My variables were more tightly controlled. The job I took after graduation was at a top 3 management consulting firm in Chicago. It was the prize I had been working toward. The hours were brutal, but I wore the exhaustion as a credential. My identity became my title, associate. My worth was measured in billable hours and the quality of my slide decks. I worked on projects that were intellectually challenging but emotionally sterile. One 6-month engagement involved helping a fast food conglomerate streamline its supply chain. I spent weeks building models to prove that by switching to a cheaper overseas supplier of beef, they could increase their profit margin by 3.4%. I never asked about the labor practices of the new supplier or the environmental impact of the increased shipping. It wasn't part of the project scope. My job was to find the most efficient solution, not the best one. We presented the final recommendation to the client's board, and my models were praised for their rigor. We had saved them an estimated $12 million a year. I received a bonus and a commendation. I felt nothing. About 2 years into the job, I was assigned to a project led by a partner named Sarah. She was sharp, respected, and had a reputation for being direct. At the end of the project, during my performance review, she gave me the highest possible rating. "Your work is impeccable, Chloe," she said, looking at my file. "You're analytical, you're disciplined, and you deliver. You'll make partner before you're 35 if you want it." "Thank you," I said. "I do." She leaned back in her chair. "Let me ask you something else. If we took away the title, the salary, and the validation of working at a place like this, what would you actually want to do?" The question landed with an unnerving thud. I had no answer. It was like asking a computer to perform a function for which it had no code. "I've always been focused on this path," I managed to say. "I can see that," she said. "Just make sure it's your path, not just a path. I spent 10 years on someone else's path. It ends in a nice house in the suburbs and a profound sense of having missed the point." Her comment lodged itself in my mind. It would surface at inconvenient times, during a 2 a.m. session formatting a PowerPoint presentation, or while I was smiling through a sterile corporate dinner. What would you actually want to do? I had no idea. The list had been my operating system for so long I couldn't imagine an alternative. The thought was terrifying. If I wasn't this collection of achievements, who was I? A year later, an opportunity arose that seemed like a logical, ambitious next step. A well-funded tech startup in San Francisco offered me a position as director of corporate strategy. It was a significant jump in title and responsibility. Mark and I had a series of long, logistical conversations. The plan had always been to stay in Chicago, but this was a Tier 1 opportunity. We amended the plan. I would move first, establish myself, and he would look for a comparable banking position and follow within a year. I gave my notice at the consulting firm. I terminated the lease on my apartment. I packed my life into boxes. The logistics were complex, but they were manageable. They were tasks to be completed. 2 weeks before my scheduled departure date, an email arrived from the startup's head of HR. The subject line was, "Update on your role." My stomach clenched. The email was brief and laden with corporate jargon. following a strategic realignment of our long-term objectives, a difficult decision to restructure. Your intended role has been eliminated, effective immediately. I read it 3 times. The offer, the foundation of my next 5 years, was gone. I called Mark. His response was calm, rational, and infuriating. "Okay, don't panic," he said. "This is exactly why high-risk moves are a bad idea. The tech world is volatile. You can call Sarah, see if you can rescind your resignation, or I can connect you with some headhunters here. We stick to the plan. The plan works." He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was trying to be helpful. But his help felt like a straitjacket. The failure was not just a career setback. It was a fundamental crack in my worldview. For the first time, a key variable had moved entirely outside of my control. I did not go back to my old firm. I moved my boxes into storage and stayed on my friend's couch, humiliated and adrift. My parents were worried. "Just take any respectable job for now, honey," my mother said over the phone. "You need to get back on your feet." To them, my lack of a job title was a dangerous void. Mark tried to manage my crisis. He created a shared spreadsheet for my job search, complete with columns for company names, application dates, networking contacts, and status updates. He would call me twice a day for a progress report. "Did you follow up with the recruiter from Deloitte? Have you customized your cover letter for the Goldman Sachs opening?" He thought he was motivating me. I felt like I was a failing project he was trying to get back on schedule. In the vacuum of my unstructured days, Sarah's question echoed. What would you actually want to do? Out of a mixture of boredom and a desperate need to feel useful, I started a small project. I had always been good with money, not in the abstract institutional sense, but in the practical, personal finance way. I noticed many of my friends in creative fields struggled with it. I created a simple 2-hour workshop called The Art of the Budget and offered it to local artists and freelancers. I rented a small room at a community center. The first session had 6 attendees. I taught them how to track expenses, create a simple financial forecast, and navigate quarterly tax payments. I didn't use corporate jargon. I used analogies they understood. One of the attendees, a potter named Leo, was terrified of spreadsheets. I sat with him and showed him how it was just a grid for organizing numbers, not a moral judgment. At the end of our 3rd session, he showed me a photograph on his phone of a new kiln he had finally been able to buy because he'd organized his finances and secured a small loan. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. That moment delivered a sense of purpose, more real than any multi-million-dollar bonus ever had. The project was not a financial success. After accounting for the room rental and materials, I made a profit of $47 over 3 months. By every metric on my old checklist, it was a failure. But the feedback I received was different from any performance review I'd ever had. One woman, a graphic designer, sent me an email a month later. "For the first time, I don't feel panicked when I think about money," she wrote. "You explained it in a way that made me feel capable, not ashamed." Through that small, unprofitable venture, I discovered something. I was good at teaching. I was good at translating complex systems into human-scale, actionable steps. I was good at creating a sense of order and competence for people who felt overwhelmed. It was a strength that had nothing to do with my degree or my resume. It was intrinsically mine. As my 6-month period of unemployment and experimentation came to an end, the pressure to get back on track mounted. Mark was patient, but his patience had a clear objective: my return to a respectable, high-earning career. I eventually took a role in corporate development at a mid-sized company. It was less demanding than consulting, but it was safe. It was a job that fit the plan. A year later, on my 28th birthday, Mark proposed. We were at a restaurant he had selected, one known for its view and its price point. He gave a short, well-reasoned speech about the strength of our partnership, our shared goals, and the timeliness of this next step. It was the logical conclusion. I said yes. It felt less like a moment of joy and more like a project milestone being successfully checked off. The relief was palpable. The San Francisco disaster was behind us. The period of uncertainty was over. I was back on the timeline. Wedding planning became my new project. I created a master spreadsheet with tabs for the budget, the guest list, vendor contacts, and a detailed timeline with deadlines for every decision. Mark was impressed with my efficiency. We operated like co-managers of a complex merger. Our discussions were about cost-benefit analyses of different venues and the optimal seating arrangement for stakeholder relationship management, also known as our families. The cracks, however, started to show. They were never about the color of the napkins. They were about the values hidden beneath the decisions. We argued about money, not the amount, but the meaning. I wanted to use a portion of our savings to help my parents with some lingering medical debt from my father's care. Mark was against it. "That's an emotional decision," he said during one tense conversation. "Our capital should be allocated to appreciating assets. A down payment on a house is the priority. That's the smart play." The arguments revealed a fundamental divide. For him, life was a game of optimization. For me, it was becoming something else, something I couldn't yet name. The stress and confusion led me to seek therapy. I found a therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma. In our first session, I laid out my life story as if I were presenting a case study, complete with the list I wrote at 16. Dr. Sharma listened. When I finished, she said something that reframed my entire existence. "That list wasn't a plan," she said. "It was a shield. A way for a scared 16-year-old to feel safe in a world that felt terrifyingly unpredictable." She gave me language from my experiences: people-pleasing, external validation, borrowed goals. For homework one week, she asked me to write down 3 things I had done that week purely for my own enjoyment, with no goal attached. I couldn't think of a single one. Even my hobbies, like running, were about tracking metrics and achieving new personal bests. She encouraged me to start with small experiments and self-trust. I started by saying no. I said no to taking on an extra project at work that wasn't my responsibility. I said no to a weekend trip with Mark's friends that I didn't want to go on. Each no was a small act of rebellion against the plan, a tiny vote for the person I was becoming over the person I was supposed to be. Mark found my new boundaries confusing. "You've become less efficient," he commented once when I told him I was blocking out 2 evenings a week for myself, with no set agenda. What's the objective of that time? The final pressure test came 3 weeks before the wedding. It arrived in the form of a document from his family's lawyer, a prenuptial agreement. I was not opposed to the idea in principle. I was a practical person. But as I read through the clauses, one passage stood out. It stipulated that in the event of a divorce, if I had taken a voluntary, prolonged career hiatus for any reason, including for the purpose of raising children, my claim to any assets accumulated during that period would be substantially waived. I brought it to Mark that night. "This clause," I said, pointing to the text, "it assumes my career will always be the one to be sacrificed. It assumes my contribution, if not directly financial, is worth less." He was dismissive, but calmly so. "It's standard boilerplate, Chloe. It's just about protecting family assets in a worst-case scenario. It's the logical, prudent thing to do. My father's firm uses this for all their clients. You're being emotional about it. My father's health scare was a worst-case scenario. My job offer being rescinded was a worst-case scenario. Life is a collection of worst-case scenarios and unexpected turns. This document isn't planning for them. It's penalizing me for them. It's saying my path is secondary to yours. Our path has always been the same," he insisted, his voice still level. "Financial security, career advancement, asset accumulation. That is the goal. This document supports that goal. This is what we've been working toward. Don't let a minor legal detail derail a decade of planning." That was the moment the hum of misalignment became a screaming siren. A decade of planning. He was right. But it was his plan, and the plan of a girl I no longer was. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be the person who would sign that document without question. The person who believed that a logical plan was the highest virtue. And I had succeeded. I had become her. But I did not want to be her for one more day. The argument did not resolve. We went to sleep in silence, the unsigned document on the nightstand between us. I did not sleep. I lay there and dismantled my life, piece by piece, until only the truth remained. Which brought me to the next morning. In the hotel suite, after I told them to leave, I sat down on the perfectly made bed. The first call was to the wedding planner. "Jane," I said, "the wedding is not happening." There was a pause. I repeated the statement. I instructed her to execute the cancellation protocol for all vendors. The second communication was a mass text message I drafted and sent to a group containing all 150 guests. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding of Chloe and Mark will not be taking place today. We apologize for the inconvenience this causes. There was a strange sense of quiet control in the logistics of the unraveling. I was dismantling the project with the same efficiency with which I had built it. There was no screaming, no crying. There was just the cold, clean, and devastating work of taking it all apart. My mother came back into the room an hour later. Her face was a ruin of confusion and hurt. Your father and we don't understand. I know, I said. I am ending a life that I chose for the wrong reasons. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be a mess. But it's my mess. Some friends sent messages of support. Others sent questions. A few, the ones most invested in the life I had been performing, went silent. Mark's family sent one terse message through his sister demanding I return the ring immediately. The consequences were real and immediate. But for the first time, the discomfort felt productive. It was the pain of a bone being reset, not the chronic ache of a joint that has been out of place for years. And in the quiet of that hotel room, surrounded by the architecture of a life I had just demolished, I started talking to the girl who had started it all. You were 16. You were sitting at that desk with your graph paper, and you were so scared. You saw the adult world as a storm, and you thought a good enough plan was a seawall that could hold back the chaos. You thought milestones were achievements, but they were just markers on a map you drew before you'd ever seen the terrain. You don't have to have it all figured out by now. You never had to. That was the core misunderstanding. The goal wasn't to arrive at a destination called figured out. The goal was to learn how to navigate. You thought confusion was failure, but it's not. It's the starting point of every important question. The question was never, how do I stick to the plan? The question, the one Sarah asked, the one Dad's heart attack asked, the one the failed job offer asked was, who am I now? You built a beautiful cage, and you called it a success. You learned to value performance over purpose, stability over truth. And I am not angry at you. I am grateful. You got me here. You kept me safe until I was strong enough to break my own rules. So, here is the new plan. Or rather, the new principle. We will choose what is true, not what is safe. We will ask better questions. We will allow the timeline to change. We will define success not by the prestige of the outcome, but by the alignment of the effort. We will learn to trust ourselves, even when we are uncertain, especially when we are uncertain. My life is not a collapsed structure, it is a cleared site. The foundation is still there. My capacity for discipline, my ability to organize, my talent for making complex things simple, those are real. They were just being applied to the wrong blueprint. Last week, I moved my things out of storage and into a small apartment. It's a 1-year lease. Yesterday, I opened my laptop and started researching graduate programs in public policy and nonprofit management. I don't know if that's the path. But it's a question, a real one, born of genuine curiosity. My calendar, once a color-coded testament to relentless productivity, is mostly empty now. But this morning, I added a new entry. It's for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. It doesn't say synergy meeting or project deadline. It just says, call the university admissions office. It's a small step, it's a start, and it's mine.